There are a lot of reasons to talk about why Donald Trump is sending armed active military personnel to Washington, D.C. But the number one reason, because it's the most popular thing that he's doing right now. Now, calling it a D.C. takeover is pretty accurate, given the fact that he's also taking over the Amtrak station there, trying to take over the police force. He's getting pretty heavily involved in everything in D.C. And you would think, well, a president doing something like that would do them political harm? No, it's the exact opposite. In fact, Trump is pretty much underwater almost in terms of every policy that he's done, ranging from immigration to the economy. If you take a national poll, he shows somewhere around 40% or less on that issue, except this one. In fact, people are so enthralled that they like what he's doing so much in that one issue that it has taken him from 40% to 45% in his rankings in the last Gallup poll, just in general, not just on that issue alone. So this means that we really need to look at this because it is a huge danger for Democrats, and it is not doing what he's saying that it's doing, but it is doing exactly what it's intended to do. That there is absolutely no reason to think whatsoever that sending armed military personnel is going to reduce crime. Not only are we not supposed to use Army personnel or military personnel or national reservists against civilians here in the United States, they are meant to fight the enemies of the country. Citizens are never enemies of the country. And you might say, but they're criminals. Well, they're not criminals until we prove that they're criminals. We need to remember that is the nature of our democracy. And people tend to be very willing to sacrifice democratic ideals, like being able to have a trial or have to actually be found guilty when they feel like they're in danger. So what Republicans have done is they have made sure that even if crime goes down, that people feel like they are constantly under threat, that they are in constant danger. This isn't to say that there isn't crime. There is crime. There's a lot of crime. But what doesn't reduce it is coming down as hard on it as you can with as much military force and armament as you can. It's never worked. Look at instances like prohibition, where we had a very strict rule and we were like, we're going to force them to follow that rule and we'll shoot anyone who doesn't. Well, all it really did was drive crime underground, where it became organized and far more effective and far more deadly. So this is highly what's likely to happen here, because what actually reduces crime is things like education, making sure that people have food, making sure that they understand why what they're doing is in fact wrong and a harm to society, and why they are valuable to society. The fact of the matter is some of you hear that and you hate that. You're like, I don't want them to get educated. I don't want them to get food, because you don't actually want to reduce crime. You want vengeance. You want to see people who hurt you get hurt. Or you just kind of like the idea of seeing people get hurt, and the only time we're really allowed to enjoy people being hurt is when they're criminals. So it's kind of like, oh, this is the one time that I can enjoy this kind of natural human tendency to enjoy seeing people harmed. Either which way, it's not going to happen. I am willing to put money on that. You're not going to see crime rates reduced because of his actions. Now, you will see crime rates will have gone down recently, but it won't be because he sent national reservists there. It will be because school started. So they did this on purpose. They sent the reservists there when they knew that there would be a natural drop in the crime rate, because when school starts, it tends to reduce crime because people are going to school, right? These people who could be committing crimes, these teenagers who might be committing crimes out on the street, are now going to school instead. But more importantly, even if you're like, you're completely wrong, it is going to reduce crime, et cetera, okay, fine. The only way to prove it is kind of over time. But let me say this, I do not think this is what it's actually intended to do. What they really want to have happen is they want Democrats to seem weak on crime. They want it to be people like me who are saying, oh, the best way to deal with crime is like feeding people and making sure that they're well educated. That's what the numbers actually show. That's going to sound weak. So really, the only option that the Democrats have is just like, yes, go shoot as many criminals as you can, because currently people feel like they're in danger. Whether they are or aren't is irrelevant. That's how they feel. They feel like they can't walk safely in the street. They're being told by their mayors, their Republican governors, they're being told by the president that they're in constant danger. They want to feel safe. And so they do not want to hear Democrats talking about these other options for reducing crime. They want violence. The American populace wants violence, and they want it to happen quickly and swiftly. They want it to be their retribution. We know this because they voted for the person who said he would be their retribution. So Democrats are in tremendous danger of sounding weak on crime. This is intentional. But there is something even worse that Trump is hoping to get out of this. At the end of the day, in their wildest dreams, what's going to happen is there's going to be someone throwing like a brick at a military individual. None of us agree with this, right? These are military service personnel It's going to be horrible. Ideally, in his world, what happens is that a national reservist actually shoots someone, and then there's a riot. Because here in the United States, we no longer believe that protests are good things. For some reason, we tend to think that protesters are lazy and that they need to get back to work, and that they're all just a bunch of criminals. So as soon as there's massive protests in a city, say like Chicago, well, then Donald Trump's going to be able to send even more military armed personnel who are going to now be encouraged to respond violently, which is going to incur more protests. And what do you do once you start having these kinds of riots? Well, not only is it going to technically prove Trump's point, right? He's going to get to say, see, look, all of these Democrat cities are violent and dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. But he's also going to be able to potentially declare martial law. At the end of the day, the Republicans are very concerned, and Trump is very concerned about the possibility that they will not win the midterm elections. They're trying to find ways around that by, say, creating more Republican seats in Texas. They may not be successful in this. The math of it has been, in the vast majority of elections over the past 50 years, in the midterm after the president is elected, they lose the House of Representatives. They know this. This is going to result in massive investigations into the Trump administration. Think about all the people that they're going to look into, ranging from Elon Musk to Donald Trump himself, but to all of these people who are doing kind of shady things in Doge, for example. So what it comes down to is they know they cannot afford that to happen. So they're trying to find every way that they can to make sure that they don't lose the next election. Well, if they feel like they are, an excellent way to simply deal with that is to declare martial law. You're having these riots. They start saying, well, you can't really trust the electoral system, and that we're going to have to put the midterm elections on hold. Now, that might seem extreme, but notice the following. He also, in theory, doesn't have to go that far. He simply can start using the military to manipulate elections in general. He can start saying things like, no, we can't trust that city. Look at what that city's doing. We can't actually trust that they're counting their ballots fairly. We're going to ignore all of those ballots. How do we know that he'd be willing to do that? Because he literally tried to do that in Georgia. The whole point is that if he can manage to manipulate the system sufficiently, he can make sure that they never leave power again. That's the ideal circumstance for them, right? Because think about the things that they've done. Really think about this for a second. The Republican Party, over literally the last 9 months, but also over a fair number of politicians ranging from Reagan to George W. Bush to Donald Trump, but also a fair number of Democrats, has consolidated more and more and more and more power to the president. There is now so much power in the presidency. They have broken so many rules in terms of the way that we might normally deal with things, ranging from gerrymandering to the way that we deal with presidential power, like sending military personnel into cities, that the next time there's a Democrat in office, Republicans have every reason to be terrified, because they're going to assume that that Democrat is going to do all of the same things and fire people in the same ways, remove elected Republicans if they can, send the FBI after them. All of the things that Republicans are doing, they know turnabout is fair play. So they can never lose another election without having to worry about the fact that the power of the presidency is going to come after them in the same way that the power of presidency is coming after Democrats right now. We really need to think about the fact that no one in our military from the top down has been willing to challenge this in any way. And you might say, well, they have to follow orders. Someone could say something, especially at the top, especially in the Pentagon. They are not. So we can no longer trust that our military is unwilling to attack us. And that, my friends, is what we should be the most concerned about. Because that is not just a matter of creating a dictatorship, it's a matter of creating a literal police state. And so whilst Donald Trump is creating a police state where he can control us and the populace, he can, in theory, have people shot before they've been convicted of crimes, we are now in a circumstance where people are glad to see it happen. The Democrats have absolutely no way out of this. There is no way for them to escape it without actually lauding it, because otherwise they seem weak. What you are seeing is highly likely to be the biggest threat to our actual democracy that we've ever seen. And let's be honest, for a lot of you, you're glad to see it because you never really liked democracy that much anyways. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this interesting, please do like and subscribe. Please, if you disagree, if I'm missing something, throw it there in the comments. I'm always happy to respond, in polite disagreement. I look forward to your thoughts to anything I've missed. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day.